Why is being a good steward of our wealth so important as Christians? Let's find out. Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. As always, you can find out more about us at dmwpodcast.com or just click in the first link below. Send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Up front, got to tell you about two guys. First of all, Squirrelly Joe's Coffee. You can see it in the background if you're watching this. Gosh, I love their coffee. I mean, squirrellyjoes.com, and that's two R's, two L's, SQUIRRELLYJOES.com. Reformed brother in the Lord, just a good dude, good coffee. We want to support him. I picked some up at Jeffrey Rice's conference last year and loved it, and sent him a picture and said, man, I love it. And he goes, I like your podcast. I go, I like your coffee. And we said, well, let's work together, and wanted to make sure we give him some business. But here's some cool thing he did for us. For all you listeners right now, if you click the link in the description below, you can get a free bag of coffee from Squirrely Joe's. Okay, all you got to do is cover shipping. He's going to give you a free bag of coffee. Check it out. He's got so many different good flavors. I'm an integrity guy myself. I like it's like caramel and chocolate flavored. But he's got all kinds of good stuff there. SquirrellyJoes.com. Check him out and click the link below. And I'm telling you, you're going to love this coffee. Also, got to tell you about a podcast. Our brother, Andrew Rappaport, over at the Rap Report. Excuse me. Hey, that's what you get in live reads. You get me coughing at you when I'm sick or not feeling well. But Rap Report, so many podcasts, so little time. If you're like me, you consume a lot of podcasts. And when you do find a new one, you are happier than a tornado in a trailer park. You like that? I like that saying, happier than a tornado in a trailer park. Look, you guys got good taste. Obviously, you're listening to Dead Men Walking, so you need to go over and listen to Rap Report. It's available anywhere that you listen to your podcast. It's Andrew Rappaport. He's talking about anything in the news. He's talking apologetics. He's talking doctrine, theology, culture. It's just a great podcast. Add it to your rotation. Check it out. He's part of the Christian Podcast Community Network. And Andrew Rappaport, a good buddy of ours, always doing good stuff at Rap Report. But you can click the link below there to start subscribing and downloading to that. Guys, we had Josiah Stowe on this week, and we had a really good conversation. He is one of the partners in Dominion Wealth Strategists, and we talked about what it means to be a good steward of our money, what it means to be disciplined and self-controlled in our budget, what it means to be generationally thinking about wealth. We talked about Proverbs and, a wise man not only leaving wealth to his children, but his children's children. We talked about the meaning of the the proverb and scripture that talks about a warning that the borrower is slave to the lender, what that means. Is debt actually good or bad? We had some talks about, the Ramsey effect on Christians, Dave Ramsey, and how we might disagree with some of those things. But what a great episode just to talk about money, wealth, policy, legislative acts that affect it, and how we view money, how we use it, and how we build wealth. Josiah, man, interesting dude. Grew up in California, moved to Kentucky, settled there, religious affairs specialist in the Army, then got into the financial aspect of things, been doing that for a while. But we talked about his business, and we talked about as his theology affects his view of money and wealth. I think the episode itself, we talked to him for about 30, 35 minutes, so not too long, but long enough to really get into some stuff. And I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So let's get into it. Let's just, I'm not going to talk about personal stuff this week. Let's get into it because I think it's a really good episode. I think it's something that Christians are severely lacking on, how to manage money, how to build wealth. Sometimes we look at money as like a bad thing. We have pastors misquoting, the love of money. No, or, money is the root of all evil. Well, it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's like, no, we are told to use money wisely, steward it wisely, but to have money or to use money or to have wealth, not an evil thing in and of itself, as long as Christ is glorified in all that we do, including finances. So let's get right into it. Next voice you hear will be me introducing or talking to Josiah Stowe from Dominion Wealth Strategists. Here we go. So Josiah, welcome to the show.
All right, it's good to be here.
So we just met recently, and for the listeners, give us like the origin story a little bit, like maybe a little bit of your testimony, where you grew up, that kind of stuff. I saw you're in the Army, religious affairs specialist. Like, what was that all about?
Cool. Yeah, so I was actually born and raised in rural Northern California, the Great Republic of Rough and Ready, California, to be specific. It's a tiny little drinking village with a mining problem, like 550 people, kind of small. Little 18-acre ranch out there with my grandparents for at least the majority of my childhood, I suppose 12 on at the very least. My parents split up when I was very young, so I kind of moved all over the place until I kind of settled there. But yeah, sort of origin story. Born and raised out there, very dispensational upbringing. I was a hardcore dispensationalist for the first 19 years of my life until I joined the Army. I kind of got out of the MacArthur bubble. A lot of Bethel Redding influence as well. So sort of Baptist Costal with the weird, like, name it and claim it, grave soaking sort of mentality, a lot of YWAM influence as well. And then John MacArthur. So it's like a Grace Bible Church that also sort of speaks in tongues every once in a while, or has that inkling. So did that for quite some time. Actually worked with a Youth for Christ organization, Campus Life, Nevada County. So that was an interdenominational sort of ministry. And at 19 years, just decided to join the Army, get out of California, do something with my life, because definitely not enjoying the standard of living that I was able to afford there in California. So ended up joining the Army as a religious affairs specialist. Wanted to serve God and country, and I didn't have a master's degree, so that's how you do it.
What does that mean? What is a religious affairs specialist?
Yeah, essentially, it's the rebranding for the chaplain assistant job.
Okay.
So used to be called chaplain assistant. Then people got a reputation. Chaplain's assistants were like the worst soldiers in the Army, more or less. No offense to you other 56 mics listening, but there's a reason for the reputation, and you know it. Right? Having your first line supervisor be a staff officer, you can get away with a lot. Right? So did that for a couple of years, but essentially doing all the administration, logistics, operations, integration, technical support, right? Being a bodyguard, altar boy, church secretary, kind of everything they needed us to be as the only enlisted support for a staff officer, a special staff officer to be specific. So you're essentially an NCOIC for those of you who are in the military or have a military background. NCOIC as a private. So it's a big job for you step into very big shoes very quickly. And you have no support, right? Because it's just you and the chaplain, supposedly a unit ministry team. But if you don't get along, it's going to be a bad time. But did that in an infantry unit for 3 years, deployed to Iraq, tail end of Operation Inherent Resolve, kicking ISIS out of Erbil. Right, so my unit got to sort of do the cleanup for the destruction of the capital of what used to be the ISIS Caliphate. Then came back home and again just served in the capacity of a religious affairs specialist, essentially just taking care of people, being a untrained, very, very much untrained therapist, essentially. For people who didn't want to talk to the chaplain, they talked to me. Operations, and a lot of suicide intervention and prevention. You're not the point of contact for that, but they end up kind of tagging you a lot. Like, hey, so-and-so said they were going to do something. You're going to stay up all night with them. Like, oh, great. All right. So doing that for some time. So infantry unit for 3 years. I was up at Garrison, Fort Campbell for a few more years after that as the funds technician. And that's kind of how I got into finance.
Okay. So then you get into finance out of the Army. And how was your theological journey? You raised kind of Baptist Costal, and then where did you end up at?
Yeah, ended up distinctly Reformed, so Reformed Baptist specifically. My grandparents, bless their hearts, very dispensationalist still, although I think they're dropping the moniker, very leaky dispensationalist in that regard. But my grandma actually recommended R.C. Sproul as like a hero of the faith, someone to definitely pay attention to and to listen to, with some caveats. He's not right on everything, supposedly.
Right.
All right. So got into him, and his series, What is Reformed Theology, pretty much just changed my mind on everything. It's like, okay. Because I was looking for some sort of systematic, and Schaeffer's, the dispensationalist Schaeffer, not the good one. His systematic theology wasn't really cutting it. It was very cut and dry. Not a whole lot of room for spirituality, just the scientific method through and through. That's why it's so big.
Yeah.
So yeah, ended up stumbling onto RC Sproul through them, James White and Jeff Durbin, the Apologia crew.
Sure.
And from them, actually ended up pretty darn close with the Fight Laugh Feast Network and the rest of the Moscow crowd. So while I'm
Sure.
Reformed Baptist, I would say I've got CREC adjacent sensibilities.
You're a rowdy Baptist.
A very rowdy Baptist, which attending Albert Mohler's church, Third Avenue here in Louisville, is interesting to
Okay.
say the least.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
tolerate me.
Although he's even Albert the last year or so has been kind of getting fiery on some subjects,
Yeah.
abolitionism, things like that, and you're going, yeah, okay, all right, I like that.
It's about time. How about that? All right,
So
because
you get
I actually worked at the seminary for quite some time. I was the
okay.
executive administrative assistant to the vice president of operations and finance, which wouldn't
Wow.
fit on a business card.
So
Right,
yeah,
so it's kind of
put that on
helping
a
them
plaque.
manage, right? Kind of helping them manage their $31 million annual operating budget. So I dealt with a lot of organizational finance before moving into personal, and a lot of just like, why are you spending money this way? This
Right.
this is not good stewardship. And doing that with big numbers made doing that with small numbers a heck of a lot easier.
So is that why you veered into finance? Just that interest from working that job?
Yeah, essentially. That and I got recruited into another financial services brokerage firm. So they
Okay.
saw my background. They're like, "Oh, great! You want to do personal finance instead?" I was like, "You mean I get to help save date nights instead of save bottom lines?" Sure, sounds good. So ended up working there. Sort of dragged into it, and then ended up really loving it. Just the help that I was able to the impact I was able to make on a personal level. The
Yeah.
numbers were smaller, but when you're helping people instead of organizations, it's a lot more impactful.
Sure. So how long are you there for in that job?
And in that other company, about a year and a half. So I've been
Okay.
on
And
and
then
off working in finance in some capacity for the better part of 6 years now.
okay. And then you said, who cares about this safe job where I get a paycheck every week? I'm going to start my own business and be crazy, kind of like me.
Yeah, yeah, sort of. The other company was
Okay.
also 1099 because you're a
True.
independent non-captive brokerage agent. So instead of brokering houses, you're brokering financial products and services.
Okay.
So it was still pretty rough and tumble, feast or famine. So now it's like, oh wait, I can actually also control uh, everything else, not just who I get access to, but the contract levels and the company culture and stuff like that. So when the opportunity presented itself for us to kind of jump ship and do our own thing, that was a pretty quick jump.
Okay. So then you start Dominion Wealth Strategies. Is that just
Mhm.
you? Do you have any partners or
Yeah,
why start that business too?
Dominion Wealth Strategists is essentially because the
Strategies.
clientele
Yeah.
I was attracting, the clientele that we were working with, more or less, pretty much exclusively, really, was the distinctly reformed community. And the way you build plans for people who have a multi generational mindset is trying to maximize their net worth at death. That was very problematic for a lot of my uplines. A lot of the people who are above me, they're like, "Why are you doing this? This is eating into your commission, and therefore eating into our commission. Like, why are you building plans this way?" Like, well, it's what they want. So they
Yeah.
were asking me to make a lot of compromises and to sell products that I wasn't super comfortable with, or weren't totally in the best interest of our clients. And they were also like really hardcore into the secret, and that sort of
Yeah.
Christianity, Christianity adjacent mentality. So we disagreed on a lot, and I was
What do you mean?
constantly
The
having
Holy
to sort
Spirit
of
isn't an obese black woman?
no,
Oh,
nor do
okay.
your thoughts generate some sort of magnetic field that attract things in the universe to you. Right.
Okay.
So having to deal with that pretty constantly was annoying, but manageable. But then again, when the opportunity presented itself to leave, Justin Johnson, the other partner in our firm,
Okay.
reached out to me. Well, he was actually working for me at that other company. Said, I've got some connections. Come look over here." I obviously, since he was one of my best guys, I said, I'll look, but just to disprove it. You're working at the best place possible. Turns out we weren't.
Right.
So yoink, off we went and
Yeah.
started our own firm.
So what does that look like when you start Dominion Wealth? Is it strategist or strategies? Sorry,
Yeah, strategists. Again,
strategists. Okay. So
with
what does that practically look like? Do you guys go grab an office? You're looking at leasing space? You're doing it out of your house when you first start? Like
yeah,
what does that look
yeah,
like?
thankfully. In order to keep operating costs as low as possible, we're all just independent, non-captive, working from our homes. Right. Normally, I have a
Yeah.
Zoom background, but it's pretty darn straightforward. Where we don't have a lease, we don't have electricity bills. We've got like a premium Zoom subscription and continuing education costs, the occasional licensing fee. That's it.
Okay.
So we kept our overhead really low. In fact, the most expensive thing was definitely the corporate lawyer to set up our LLC, C corp, S corp structure we've got going on.
Yeah.
Wyoming, for a little extra privacy. So that was a little expensive, but everything else was pretty turnkey. Right, just developing the workflows that we're going to work out of, making sure that we're good on compliance. That we the LLC that handles the securities, the 401ks, the investments, is a distinct and separate entity from the one that just handles the insurance. But then there's,
Sure.
lead funnels passing back and forth. And that's been interesting. Not the most fun thing in the world, but if that's the cost to be able to build financial plans without compromise, that's an easy answer.
Yeah. So you talked about earlier about really maximizing wealth at death for the generationally minded. So what kind of services do you guys offer, and what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So again, in order to keep with compliance, I'll say the things that we have access to within our network, and when I say we, that's what I mean for future listeners, and if the SEC is listening in. Right. So Dominion Wealth Strategists is a full-service financial services brokerage firm where we do everything from baptism to burial. That's one of the taglines at the very least. Where essentially you need help with budgeting, we'll help you with budgeting. You need to take dominion over your direct personal finances. The money that comes in, you need to be in charge of the money that goes out, right? And to do so carefully. So we usually save the average family $300 to $500 a month right there, just itemizing everything and cutting out unnecessary expenses. Right? We'll do everything. We'll get as involved as you need us to. I even helped the guy get his home re-insulated and get his windows replaced because he was spending like $500 a month on electricity, right? Because he had like resistive heating and no insulation in his house. He ended up getting a tax credit on the back end for that. So we'll get as involved as we need to. We actually recently saved a family $8,000 a month because he didn't know where any of his money was going. His wife was apparently pretty aggressive with the Amazon purchases. So $8,000 a month right there. But we'll start with budgeting. Then we'll go through debt pay down. We have, I wouldn't even say it's proprietary. It's just unusual for the folks who are used to Dave Ramsey. We do the debt avalanche instead of the debt snowball because we're not trying to build psychological momentum. We're trying to pay off your debt. So we're going to tackle the thing that's charging you the most interest and do it that way instead of trying to tackle the smallest balance. Right. But a debt pay down strategy, debt consolidation loans if need be, or if they make any sense, which 80% of the time they don't. Right? And we'll even walk someone through the bankruptcy process if necessary. Build up your savings account as well. Make sure you have a robust emergency fund. We'll help you with insurance. Right? All of our agents are licensed insurance producers, so they can handle that part pretty easy. That's a 20-hour online course, 1 hour standardized test. So that's an easy way to get your foot in the door. And then a formal referral off to Dominion Securities, right? Dominion Financial Planning over there. And we'll get your 401ks, your IRAs taken care of. Make sure you're investing well. That particular company has been netting 15% returns over the last 5 years. Right, so very solid with the investment strategy there. A lot of mutual funds, ETFs, some tax loss harvesting, and some things that I'm not totally at liberty to disclose. And then we'll also help with estate planning. Right, you actually don't have to talk to a lawyer if you go through us. We'll make sure all the paperwork's taken care of. Right, and we'll have to charge you for that. But a typical lawyer costs $5,000, and we're working through pricing right now, but it's going to be a heck of a lot less than that. So we do, again, everything, burial, baptism, everything in between, just trying to provide a holistic one-stop shop for all things financial for the church, right? Providing education, advice, and strategy so that they can take dominion.
It seems pretty unique because, you go down the street here to a Edward Jones or someone like that. They're selling a few specific products, and it sounds like the ones that they are being told to kind of push. They might not necessarily do what's best for the client. They're doing what's best for their either commission or for their brokerage. And sounds like you get pretty involved all the way through. I I think my personal opinion is that is biblical. But for those who are listening, going, maybe I'll play devil's advocate. Why is that important for the Christian to be financially stable, maybe even generationally wealthy? One, I would hear some arguments I hear in my mind if I'm playing devil's advocate is, hey, our kingdom isn't of this world. The dispensational might go, hey, I might not be here much longer. I mean, Jesus is coming back any day. Now, that's an eschatology argument. And I've talked at length on how that eschatology and taking it to an extreme can really hinder the Great Commission and the preaching of the gospel. But why is, in your view, why is it important for a Christian to be, like I said, financially stable or wealthy?
Yeah, because we're not Gnostic ascetics. All right.
Okay.
First and foremost, we're not Buddhists. The answer to the corrupting nature of money is not just to get rid of all your money. It's actually to be better, right? It's a calling to be better. So a man cannot serve God and mammon, the love of wealth. Sure, you don't love money for money's sake, but I like to misquote J.R. Tolkien here. I love not the IRA for its investments, but I only love what it can provide. So we want to make sure that Christians are wealthy, because the people who are wealthy have a lot of influence in this world by nature, right? Money is the economic authority to allocate resources according to your will. So the people who have it currently are mostly degenerates, and they are allocating it according to their will. But really, the people who should be are the ones who have the right view of reality. Right? That's why we happen to work a lot with CREC folks and some Reformed Baptists. You have a right view of reality, so you should be the one who has the resources to allocate. Right? And it's not envy either. It's I have a objectively better view of reality, so I should be the one to have it. I should be the one to have those resources so I can steward them properly. Right? Better me than Bill Gates. 100% of the time. Better me than Jeffrey Epstein. 100% of the time. All right. So we really should have this desire to get wealth so that the people stewarding it are better people. All right. First and foremost, as an argument there. Secondarily, wealth is built into the Dominion mandate. Right? Work and wealth, both and. So if you haven't read David Bonson's Full Time, I think he does a very good exegetical argument here. But essentially, work was instituted pre-fall. Adam had a job to do. Right, to go expand the garden. There's gold in the land of Havilah. Why are gold and precious stones useful pre-economics? Right? Because we have some proto-economic arguments even in Genesis. Right? We don't get like proper wealth or descriptions of wealth until Abraham. He had gold and livestock and property. Right? But we do see the sort of wealth being a result of good and faithful work. And so if you're going to do good and faithful work in this world, which I think every Christian has a calling to do, then you're going to end up wealthy. And then you should know what to do with that wealth once you have it. And the answer is not the only good thing a Christian can do with wealth is to give it up. The answer is the best thing a Christian can do with wealth is to multiply it, as we see many times in Scripture with a good and faithful servant, not bearing your talents, but actually making a return on investment. In fact, Christ seemed to expect a 100% return on investment. To the servant who gave 10 talents, he got 10 talents back. The servant who gave 5, he got 5 talents back. And the servant who buried his talents at least got his talents back. You put your money in the bank, you're losing 3% of your dollar per year. And you're being less faithful than the one who is chastised as a wicked servant if all you're doing is keeping your money in the bank.
Yeah, it also sounds like, too, from your perspective, like you said, talking about budgeting and debt relief and things like that. Big picture, you just explained Dominion mandate and things like that. But even from a biblical principle kind of angle, if you're teaching, which I think this lacks wholly in the greater Western church, just knowing how to budget and being and adhering to that is a form of discipline and self-control, which Proverbs in the Bible commands us to have. And I think far too often, probably in your experiences as well, and as a real estate broker, I get into people's finances as well. And I'm not disclosing anything personal, but I've looked at finances and go, okay, there's a lot of lack of self-control and discipline and really the biblical principles and characteristics that we are called to have, right? So I think it can be a teaching moment too for believers to train other Christians, not only in financial literacy, but financial self-control, financial discipline, right? Like how to steward,
Yeah.
because like you just pointed out, it's a biblical command to steward wisely. And that word wisely, I think, incorporates a whole lot. We throw around the word wisdom and discernment very loosely. Sometimes I do too often on this podcast. I try to define it as much as I can, but those are big, deep, expansive words that encapsulate a lot of different things when you're having wisdom and discernment when it comes to financial matters. So I kind of see it as twofold. You're dealing with big picture things, but it sounds
Mhm.
like your company is also dealing with some of those. I don't want to say minor, but some of those things that go overlooked within the church. Like it's amazing to me how many church going, pew sitting Christians are just financially illiterate and employ horrible financial practices that are
Mhm.
anti-biblical, anti-godly in and of itself. But yet our shepherds kind of just don't talk about it too much. Not that I'm saying the church should be all about money and, we're not a seeker friendly Stephen Furtick. Let's talk, financial literacy classes. I'm not for that. I'm saying I think it
Right.
needs to be balanced. But would you agree that you're kind of dealing with both ends of the spectrum, something big picture and also macro and micro level?
Yeah. Well, you have to start micro, otherwise the macro never happens. Right.
Okay.
So if you're faithful over a little, God will set you over much. If you can't handle your own home's personal finances, what makes you think you can actively manage the investments in a 401k?
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
we need to start small. Let's get your budget nailed down. Do you know where every single dollar is going? Most people don't. Right. The vast majority of the clients we sit down with have never budgeted before, or it's a spreadsheet that they maybe reference every 2 or 3 months. Right.
Okay.
So we usually recommend they get set up with some sort of app that's going to do a lot of the discipline work for them. Right. Outsource it a little bit, but something like Rocket Money or Monarch or You Need a Budget. Right. Rocket Money is free, so we tend to recommend that, or at least the free version
Yeah.
does everything we need it to. Right. But like take proper or count the cost. Like really, how much money are you bringing in, and where is it going? Are you spending less than 50% of your money on housing? If you can, right? Ideally, like 27-ish percent, but most people aren't hitting that metric. Not these days. But make sure that you're squeezing every dollar that you can out, because like $5 today could be $50 by the time you retire. If you're investing it wisely, if you're stewarding it correctly, it's going to double every 7-8 years. So we're really going to want to make sure that we take Dominion now, early, and start stewarding wisely as soon as possible. Again, long-term goal for the company: if every single churchman sets up an account with us and we double their money every 7 or 8 years, we're going to have too much money. Now we're going to start
Sure.
funding projects like, oh yeah, okay, every single CREC church gets a stained glass window. There you go. Go figure it out. All right. But we want beautiful churches. We want stone churches. We want abortion to be lobbied out of existence in like 5-10 years, and nobody could deny us because we have too much economic authority. We're allocating the resources accordingly, and people just move. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work we can do here. Money seems to be one of the knobs that we can twist, that the church has largely ignored or has claimed as like some evil thing. The rich young ruler, give away all your money, that way you can follow me. That sort of mentality, because that's the point of that parable, has really gotten into the church, and that's why I think she's been largely fairly culturally ineffective. Right, the sort of
Yeah.
retreatism and defeatism. You don't have to be post-millennial to take dominion over your finance, but it does help. Right? At the very least,
Right.
optimistic mill as sort of a background driver, because we do, right. We have a responsibility to do well and to support, you know, the what's it called, human flourishing, right?
Yeah.
And Christians have a distinct, unique monopoly on what actually constitutes the systems necessary for human flourishing. So
Yeah.
we
No,
ought to be
that's
the
true.
ones who are in charge of it.
So, what, in your estimation, professional opinion, what are some of the biggest obstacles of generational wealth for the Christian in a secular humanist economy? Because I look at it and I go, this has got to
Mhm.
be you can eat an elephant a bite at a time type situation, because you look at the corruption in the Federal Reserve, right? A private
Mhm.
equity company running our monetary services. You look at how taxes are set up, and so I mean, not even unbiblical, but just horribly not spent and collected. You look at all these different monetary policies that are just wretched in and of themselves.
Mhm.
What are the obstacles first, and then two, how do we overcome those obstacles as believers who are trying to create generational wealth and steward correctly?
Yeah. Biggest current obstacle I see in actually cultivating generational wealth has been some really terrible advice that people treat as gospel. So those of you who are watching the video, you'll know who I mean. Those of you at home, you're going to figure it out. All right. Right, there's been a lot of really terrible advice given in the church. Stuff that is legitimately harmful. I'd say if you're trying to pull an 8% disbursement per year out of your retirement account and you run out of money, you have one person to thank for that. And I think he's cost Christendom billions of dollars. But if we're talking zooming out from just poor financial education in the church, advice that's useful up to about step 4, it's just awful beyond that, then yeah, I'd say the main obstacles seem to be this retreatist mentality, or this I need the thing to be perfect in it if I'm going to put my money in it. Right. So I will not invest in the stock market because the stock market's corrupt. Well, if you want your money to grow at 15%, you're not going to be able to do that at a bank. Not that a bank's any better. Right. Or the infinite banking strategy that seems to be really popular. You're getting like 5 or 6% dividends. If you're going to cut your own legs off when you're trying to run, it's not going to happen. Right. So we need to invest wisely, not invest at all. If you want to avoid BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard as just moral principles, okay. But if Christians never take a controlling interest in those companies, then surprise, they're going to do secular things. All right. So I say a wise investing, a careful investing, and a strategized investing, not just on the individual level, but on the group level. If we can take enough of a controlling interest, that's BlackRock's whole deal. They're investing other people's money. They're really only in the game taking a small assets under management fee in order to have control over those companies.
Yeah.
If the Christians did that, surprise, there wouldn't be DEI. There'd be like the reverse, where okay, you're not going to have this, or this in your company anymore because those are directly going against God's commandments. You're going to be a more moral company because Christians are now running the show. Right. So long term, I'd say we just need to be thinking more long term. If your ability to think long term is only about 7 years long, because the world's going to end in 7 years, you're not going to accomplish much. Not really. It's going to be seriously truncated. MacArthur has accomplished a lot despite his eschatology, but it's not because of it. Right. Sort of acting in spite of it. Right. So, goodness, there is a lot in that question, a lot to cover.
Yeah.
But
really quick, I would interject as you shift there too. I would say most of the time when I've met, I know we keep saying the word dispensational, but that theology that for the last 150 years in America has really taken over the eschatology system in most Christians because of a Kirk Cameron movie or set of movies have developed this crazy notion of eschatology, of dispensationalism and kind of rapture theology. I find that when I talk to most of them, it's kind of an excuse not to have discipline and self-control and become financially literate. It's like, well, I'm going to be out of here soon anyway, so I can just keep doing the things that I do that aren't working. When in fact, kind of, what's really the risk versus reward there? Let's say you are, and you're going, I'm waiting for the return of Christ. It's imminent. I think it's going to be in the next decade. Well, what is the downturn of working towards something generationally, even if it ends in 10 years? There's really only upside. At the very least, what happens is Christ's triumphant return. I mean, that's the downside. So I found it in my own life. I can rationalize just about anything. I can rationalize purchases and not being financially literate, and I found that that's almost a rationalization for not being financially literate, for not going out and fulfilling the Great Commission, for not preaching the gospel, for not doing a lot of things, for not getting involved in politics, for not getting involved in legislative things. Hey, I'm just going to put my head in the sand. God's going to be here any second. Not that I wanted to make this a whole eschatology episode, but I found that you can use just about anything in your life to make it an excuse not to do a little hard work and really reap what start sowing so you can reap. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I used to run a page called Epistemologically Charged Truths for Theologically Inclined Youths back in the day. And
you
in
love
my tenure there, Oh, it's
Just
glorious, right?
gravitate towards them.
So in my experience there, I did come to the solid conclusion that man is not primarily a rational creature. He's an emotional creature that likes to think he's rational. So the
Okay.
decisions you make almost always are based on some desire, some component of desire, not on pure logos. It's almost always pathos, if we're going to get in the rhetoric. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of people are using the dispensationalist mindset as an excuse not to do good work because the commands of God don't allow the things that they're using as or the behaviors that they're excusing. Right, we are still called to be good stewards. We are still called to be faithful. We are still called to set up our an inheritance for our children and our children's children. Right, those are godly commands that are given explicitly. So for someone to ignore them or to deny them, because why polish brass on a sinking ship? It's just directly contradictory. Right.
Yeah.
I think an eschatology that supports a more, let's say, agreeable mentality to that sort of long-term planning is good, but it's also going to be some sort of excuse. It's not directly correlatable. The people who want to do good work regardless of eschatology. The people who want an excuse will have an
I like that.
excuse regardless of eschatology. Right. There are lazy post mills, right? Because
Sure.
well, our plans are measured in centuries. I can wait around. It's going to happen
Sure.
eventually. All right. So the more important thing for me, eschatology is a supporting character in your excuses or lack thereof. You still need to make the things happen. Right. You still need to make the ultimate decision on what you're going to do with your life, your resources, your money.
Okay. So, what are some pragmatic things as we wrap this up here that people can do?
Yeah.
Like, what are
Well,
some
of course.
real world steps if they were coming to you or talking to you, or they want to click on the link below where you'll be linked up to check out your company? Like, what are some real things that they could do?
Yeah, of course. I am inclined to say meet with us. That's sort of our whole
Right.
shtick is to try to help you find out exactly what that looks like for you specifically. We do not give blanket advice. So, or the blanket advice I could give is going to be to the lowest common denominator, which means for
Sure.
most people it's bad advice. So I'd say
Yeah.
like if you have a debt that's 4.5% or less, don't prioritize paying it off because you're going to invest in T-bills. Put your money
Yeah.
with the government and make 4.5%. So that there's easily arbitrageable debts you should not pay off. I'd say 6% is a good line for most people, maybe 8 or 9% if you're really into private equity and venture capital. Right. But pay off your debts,
Yeah.
build up an emergency fund, maybe 1 month to start, then pay off your debts above your risk tolerance rate, and then back to your emergency fund 3 to 4 months, 3 to 6. You should get your life insurance in order. Make sure that you're worth about as much dead as you are alive. That way you're taking care of your wife and kids, right? Even if
Yeah.
you're not there to actually provide. But that's just, you're not tempting God by doing that either. It's just
Yeah.
shrewd business planning. So you want to make sure you cover like all of your debts, 10 years worth of your income, the remaining balance on your mortgage, right? Although that may be an arbitrageable debt your wife would want you to not necessarily pay off, or she doesn't
Yeah.
have to. Make sure you're covering your kids' education expenses. You're putting them through private school, 10 grand a year. You should probably provide that so your wife can continue to do that for your kids, right? If something happens to you and your kids, make sure that the guardian of your kids is also financially literate. All right, there's a lot of practical steps. In fact, I'd say every single one of our 6 steps is a practical one where some
Yeah.
people aren't quite ready to cross certain bridges. If they don't have $1,000 a month in discretionary income, there's a lot of financial planning we don't do because it's too complicated for their given situation. We're not going to cut the $10 they truly have to actually invest in half and split it up. That's not worth our time or theirs. All right.
Yeah.
So there's as far as practical steps, set a meeting with us. Introductory overview first, so we can get to know you and your unique situation. Maybe we'll go for data collection during that meeting, maybe a later meeting, depending on how complicated your situation is. And then let us do a full financial workup for you. Every meeting we have is free. Right, we get paid on the back end. As those of you who are in real estate know, seller pays closing costs, and the seller in this case is the 58 different companies, 93 different companies.
Not necessarily since the National Association Realtor settlement on August
Fair,
17th. It's a little different now, but
yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
Poor Zillow. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But in either case, right, seller generally pays closing costs. It does still work that way in our industry. So you're not going to pay us a dime unless you opt into like business consulting or estate planning or a few things that we will recommend when you're ready to cross that bridge. But basically, it's all going to be free. Education, advice, and strategy from a distinctly reformed perspective. Basically, just taking Gary North's books and applying them to
and applying it.
applying them today, because I think Gary
Yeah.
North's great for the 90s, not so good for today. So that's essentially what we're doing, long and short of it. So we'd be happy to have you as clients, or again, you don't have to stick around. We'd be happy to meet with you once a year. We'd be happy just to build you a plan once if that's all you need. So we'll meet you where you're at and do as much as you're willing to let us do.
Yeah, no, I asked that question and it was kind of a trick question because I wanted to see how you answered it. You didn't know it was a trick question, but because I get that question a lot in real estate. What do I need to do to invest in this or purchase that or sell that? And I usually come back with, well, it's not a blanket statement. I can't just give you, there might be 2 or 3 basic things that every single person has to do, but every situation is different and you can't give blanket advice on very specific transactions. No 2 properties are the same in my industry. I'm sure no 2 financial transactions are the same in yours. So I was happy to hear you answer it that way. You kind of passed a secret test for me in my mind, but I think we're tracking on a lot of the same things. What I don't get, and let me just get your opinion on this before I let you go, because I grew up in a household, and God bless my father, Christian household, read a Proverbs a day. There's 31 Proverbs, 31, days in a month, and most of them. And reading through Proverbs, he was a no debt guy. I mean, he was the original Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey. Okay. Everything was in cash, no credit cards, don't go into debt, put 50% of your earnings in the bank. Right. And he quoted Proverbs a lot. The lender is the borrower is slave to the lender. Right. And as I got older, I realized, well, Proverbs isn't necessarily a book of rules. It's a book of warnings, because the world is convoluted and there's lots of different situations. And Solomon is warning you, if you borrow money, just know that you will have responsibilities to that lender, right? Yeah. And we have to realize that, right? Yeah. And now, even being alive in the last 15 years, it blows my mind how popular guys like no debt guys like Dave Ramsey, almost no debt to your detriment, Dave Ramsey guys, can still become popular when we were basically able to borrow money for almost free for 2 or 1 or 2 or 3% in some cases. Now that rate has jumped in the last year and a half. And for those of you that are not either in financial or real estate industry, we might get a little geeky here on you with me and Josiah, but just hold on for a minute, to where there were times where I could absolutely borrow money to flip something for a very short term to make much, much more money in real estate. And I would be happy to take on that debt for a limited amount of time, knowing full well what my responsibility is to that lender and what I would have to do to pay off that debt. But also going, how are these guys that are saying, you can't spend 74 cents on 2 gumballs because you can't go in debt? And you're going, but I can leverage debt in real estate. Now, real estate is my realm, so that's why I'm talking about that. I'm sure you have some other realms that you're expert in that I'm not. But in my realm, I know real estate. I've been doing it 15 years. I have helped people make millions of dollars on their investments. So I'm comfortable in that, right? I can use temporary debt for those things. Yes, I know I have a responsibility lender, as Proverbs says, but Proverbs also says, the wise man leaves a inheritance to not only his children, but his children's children. So I'm thinking we're tracking on the same page, and for the listeners out there too, to where we look at as money like a tool, and we steward it wisely. Correct? Is that kind of what I'm gathering from this? To where there might be times, if it's correct for the right client, to possibly take on debt, to use it to create revenue. I'm thinking you're not in that Dave Ramsey school. You're a little more open-minded with using money as a tool if it makes sense, correct?
Right. And again, the proverb, the borrower is the slave to the lender, that's a doulos kind of situation. Kaiser doulos. So it's, you now work for him. There's a portion of your labor that is going to be repaying that debt. You now work for the guy, because it's not slavery in the American sense at all. So again, anytime you say slave in an American context, people are like, oh no, that's awful. Like, no, you're an indentured servant to the lender, because now a portion of your earnings are going to be going toward that debt. He's making a profit off of you. Right. And I think anything less than 3% is actually predatory in a lot of senses, because you're not even keeping up with inflation. So you're actually being predatory against the government if you're not keeping up. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. You could be a little bit of a rebel and charge the government some money. But in general, wealth is absolutely a tool. In fact, wealth in scripture is described almost exclusively in precious metals, precious stones, livestock, and property. So if you're going to leave an inheritance to your children, it better be something tangible, not just a bunch of accounts. Right? You should be leaving a house, but maybe in a trust, so there's no taxable transaction as that happens. As I'm sure you could tell them a little bit more about. But yeah, money is absolutely a tool, and we shouldn't fear debt. We should fear usury. And usury in my eyes is anything over probably about 6 or 7%, right? Where it's the lender in that case is using you as an investment, and they are pulling a compound interest on that investment. You should pull compound interest on things that are actually productive. People, if you're treating them as productive, is slavery in a very real sense.
Man, don't get me started. You're going to get me started on income taxes and economic slavery here. We go down that road. I'll get on my soapbox.
Work within the system as we work to improve it. But a Christian government, a theonomic government, would not have an income tax. So put that in your pipe and smoke.
That's right. And I will, as a good Reformed Presbyterian. I have a wall of pipes in the other room. So shout out to your social medias, your website. I'll link up everything below. But if people want to get in contact with your company or just you, follow what you're doing, where can they find you, man?
Oh, yeah. So Dominion Wealth Strategists on Facebook. That's, again, kind of a meme page at this point because that's my background. That's what I'm good at. So marketing via memes. And Facebook seems to be the most engaging. Right? We are also on X. We're also on Instagram. Please follow us on Instagram. You'd be one of like 50 people to do so. X as well. I'm trying to get into it. LinkedIn, right? We're on basically all the major social media sites, just not Gab, MeWe, Parler. Not there yet because there's not enough people.
Right.
Right. But Facebook would be the best. You can head to our website, dominionwealthstrategist.com, or our redirect, which is reformed.money, which I'm surprised was available, but in a very real sense, I'm not terribly surprised that was available. We do need to get a little bit better in the culture at taking dominion over our finances. So those are where you can find us. Or, if you want to follow me personally on Facebook for some reason, my profile is public. So Josiah Stowe, it's me. You're going to get weird stuff. It's not going to be finance related most of the time. That's what this is for. All right. But happy to have you follow along for some good education advice and strategy from a distinctly Reformed perspective.
Cool. Josiah, it's so great to sit down and talk with you. Thank you for your time today.
Likewise. You take care.
Awesome. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. As always, you can find out more about dmwpodcast.com. That's where you can go to support the show. We got a snarky little merchandise cave there. We've got the Wine 'em, Dine 'em, Romans 9 'em shirts. Those always sell well. As well as the new redesigned limited run, Job 13:5. How about you shut up and let that be your wisdom? Sometimes you just have to quote scripture to the pagans, even if they don't like it. But you can send us a text message, too, in the description below. You want to see a guest on, you have some constructive criticism, you just want to say hi, click that link, send it right to my phone. I'll get in reply with you, and we'll see what we can do. Guys, as always, remember the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to check us out at dmwpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight Laugh Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the PubTV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.